to work to. Okay, I've got that. And that's really the theme of tonight. So what we work to do retrofit well or better, and how we develop the skills to get there. I'm very much thinking about our own region, so the Yorkshire region. So we're starting with, in a moment, with Alex Honey from QODA, talking about PAS 2035, and I'm sure most of you know what PAS 2035 is, but may not know some of the detail that Alex will go into. And then we're going to cover the AECB CarbonLite training, and I'll come back to that. And finally, we're going to look at what's going on.
Please doing that.
Oh, if you are, could you mute if you've just joined us? Just say background noise, please. And then finally, we're going to look at Harrogate College and what's going on in our localities, some exciting initiatives going on there. So I don't think there's any more I need to say at the moment, except to say that we can say we're going into breakout rooms after the talks. So you'll have a chance to talk, and during the talk, each presentation, if you have questions, can you put them in the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go. Okay, right. So I think I'm going to hand straight over to Alex Honey from QODA to talk about PAS 2035.
I shall be amazed if this all works, the technology, because I'm a bit of a Luddite.
Well, we seem to be there so far. Is everybody? Yeah.
You can see. Excellent. Brilliant. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. God, it's amazing when it works, isn't it? Okay, so I was given this title, Beginner's Guide to PAS 2035, and what projects it applies to, with some brief examples of how PAS 2035 has been applied on social housing retrofits. So I am going to skim through it because I was told to do a beginner's guide. So apologies in advance if some of you are fantastic experts on retrofit and PAS 2035, you might not necessarily pick up too much, but we'll give it our best shot. So on the basis that it was a beginner's guide, I just thought I'd mention that PAS is actually as an acronym, and it's a publicly available standard. So and that's what we're going to be talking about this evening briefly, and also some real life examples of a project that I've been working on in Tunbridge in Kent at the moment, and hence that's the first photograph. So let's start at the beginning. It's always a very good place to start at the beginning. As an industry, it is said that if you go and buy a house, you have less consumer rights than if you go and buy a toaster from Argos. And also, it's been said that probably since Victorian times at least, build quality has been rather hit and miss. And so there's a rather dangerous combination of poor consumer rights coupled with poor quality product has meant that the housing industry in particular has got quite a reputation to uphold. And it could do a lot better. So over the years, there's been various reports. I've read some from the 1930s, and it's the same sort of story about lack of training, lack of quality, and lack of productivity, and a very poor product that gets dropped out at the end of the conveyor belt. And various people have tried their best to try and drag the construction industry and the home building industry and the retrofit industry into well, even the 19th century would be progress, but even, obviously for some of us, the 20th and 21st century. So one of the more recent ones is the Peter Bonfield review entitled Each Home Counts, which is now unbelievably 6 years old. And it had at least 27 recommendations on how industry and government could collaborate to support the establishment of a quality mark for domestic energy efficiency retrofit. Clearly, the whole point of retrofit of our homes is that we have got the coldest, leakiest, most expensive to heat homes in Europe. And I'm sure it'll all be an even sharper focus when Putin invades the Ukraine in the next week or so, and all our gas prices go up another 20 or 30%, that actually the consumption of energy in our homes is out of all proportion to what it should be, and we should be living in much more energy efficient homes that are much more lower carbon in terms of their energy consumption. So the two key strategic objectives of the Bonfield review was to look at how could we boost demand for energy efficiency measures from consumers by improving trust in the industry. And the other key strategic objective was to reduce risks such that private finance might be encouraged to get involved with helping to finance what is a gargantuan task. We've got something like 20+ million leaky homes in the UK that at some point we need to do something to. And if we think that we need to spend anywhere between 20 and say 50,000 a house, that turns into huge amounts of money very, very quickly. And therefore the government is rather hoping that you, the taxpayers and investors in the private sector will take part in that funding process such that the government doesn't have to shoulder all of the cost through public debt. So out of the back of that, it came sort of past 2035, and some of the wording and some of the thinking is somewhat similar to the Green Deal and that short-lived scheme that the government devised, and where we all rushed off to become Green Deal assessors and then realised that it wasn't really going to be very successful. So one of the key ones is the idea of producing a consumer charter to help protect customers, and introducing a code of conduct for companies, and also a code of practice for each element of works that you do to a house. There's also an approved certification scheme for installers and designers and assessors, and that there would be an implementation board, i.e. Trustmark, to basically make sure that the whole system is working correctly. So PAS 2035, for those that aren't in the know, is basically a standard that's been introduced to try and help the retrofit industry produce a good quality product that the consumer can believe in. And it's currently, if you want to try and tap into any government largesse, and there is a limited number of funds and grants and schemes out there at the moment coming from government, if you want to participate in accessing any of those funds, then the project needs to work within the framework of PAS 2035, and that all your installers are PAS 2030 registered. Otherwise, you won't get any money. So, unbelievably, the project that I was in, just as an example, and I'm not going to name and shame anyone, it was one of the pilot projects being launched by BEIS, and so it's an SHDF funded project, so that's Social Housing Decarbonation Fund pilot project. And when we first met the contractor, they didn't think there was much need for a design. Interesting, because really, I think most successful projects really ought to have a design. You know, we ought to think about how do we actually approach a house? How do we retrofit this house? And how do we take a whole house approach? How do we look at it in the round? How do we create a very effective, warm home for the occupants? And so the idea of an appropriate design stage process is a bit of a surprise for some in the industry, although for those of us that kind of like our passive house, etc., the design is obviously the most important part of the process. So we need to go and have a look at the building. We need to assess what's going wrong with it. We need to make sure that it's free of defects before we do any works to it. And then we need to come up with a robust design of works that complement one another, such that they all work together, such that when we go and complete the works, the consumer is left with a really nice home that's comfortable to live in and won't fall apart after a few weeks. On top of that, we've also got some elements about this sort of quality assurance framework. So the idea is that auditors can come and check the works, make sure that they're being done to a good standard, and also that there's a consistent and fair process for redress if things go wrong. So as you can see, there's a lot of this is about trying to create an environment where consumers feel empowered and protected, shall we say, from the vagaries of poor quality workmanship, which has been the bane of this industry. I think the failure rate for retrofit up to now has been about 10% or more. So it's not as though it's without failure. And there's been some very well documented failures within retrofit. The whole purpose of the exercise is that we turn up to a house, we do these works to a really good standard, and then we can leave them alone for 30 odd years because we've done a good job, and they will help to decarbonize our social housing stock, particularly, but all housing stock. So part of what we're trying to do is to improve the usability and durability of the buildings. And the project that I've been involved with now for over a year is, as I say, in Tunbridge in Kent. So we'll see a long way from sunny Yorkshire, and tend to have less snow and less cold weather than you hardy folk up north. Nonetheless, it can get cold, and these houses are wimpy no fines concrete homes. And when I did a thermographic image of the houses before we did any works, I could tell you which radiators were on in which rooms from the outside. That's how poor they are in terms of their thermal performance. So we're very much about PAS 2035 is to try and give an improved comfort and health for the occupants of the buildings. And also, of course, trying to reduce their energy bills is a very important element of what we're trying to do. And the last one on the bottom is this minimization of the performance gap. It keeps coming back to quality. PAS 2035, I have had quite a few run-ins with a few contractors now, and they keep saying it was really bureaucratic and we shouldn't really need to worry about all of this. And my retort has been, if the industry was absolutely brilliant at doing retrofit, then there wouldn't be PAS 2035. There wouldn't be any need for this. And so clearly the industry have got what they've deserved. If you can't produce a really good quality product and protect your consumers, eventually government is likely to step in some form and make you. And this is what's slowly happening. So the core principles to PAS 2035 is professional accountability. I like to think of myself as vaguely professional. I am a retrofit coordinator, a SAP assessor, passive house, air tester. I've got lots of bits of paper. So I'm relatively professional, and I like to make sure that I kind of work with a team to provide a really good, successful project. But also, if things go wrong, is to put our hands up and admit failure and hopefully learn from those mistakes. Every house should be a whole house retrofit. We need to think about the house in the round. And unfortunately, the government is very minded of single measures. And what I mean by a single measure is, oh, let's put in a new boiler, or let's top up the loft insulation. And they're all very fine and dandy single measures. But of course, if you don't think about the whole building in the round, you end up with a sort of disconnected set of improvements that have been made to the house that don't necessarily end up being successful. And so the PAS 2035 is very much this idea of trying to come up with a plan for the house in the whole. So you're looking at the fabric as well as the heating and ventilation systems. It's saying that every house is unique, and even though we had 60 houses that are normally all the same, I can assure you that everyone had its own little foible. So people that had put a patio door in and instead of windows at the rear of the building, or the lean-tos that aren't on some buildings, or hip roofs and gable roofs. So every house was ever so slightly different, and that does need to be taken into you bear that in mind when you're working on these sort of properties. Build tight, ventilate right. This is starting to feel very much like passive house. As one of Chris's famous quotes that one of Chris's colleagues have said, and it's a quote that stuck with me, Chris, and I'm really thankful for you. It's that idea of was it a very well insulated wind tunnel. I think we should sort of hone in on that idea, a well insulated wind tunnel. So the idea is that we should actually, and passive house is very much about this sort of mentality, about creating a very airtight sealed box such that it isn't a sort of a wind tunnel at all, and that the air is kept within the home, and that we actually provide the right amount of ventilation through a ventilation system to make sure that the occupants are healthy. And again, that's a bit of an anathema to some of the teams that I've been working with, and actually introducing the idea of an air tightness layer and defining that as part of the design stage process, and was quite a shock to the system. Quality. I couldn't agree more. And luckily, being a member of the Institute of Clerk of Works, I've been very happy to wander around site and wave my finger. And unfortunately, most of the photographs I have are always photographs of things that have gone wrong. But overall, quality can be improved by checking, and also going back and making sure that those actually doing the works have actually received some training. And talking of training, just for a nanosecond, did you realize that there isn't actually a formal scheme to train people on how to install Windows, which I was told about recently? What do you think? So we let people loose on our houses that aren't necessarily trained or have the experience to actually do things correctly. And that's where professionals need to step in and help make sure that those doing the works on our behalf are taught to a high standard. Health and Safety at Work Act would talk about information, instruction, and training. And that's the same applies to actually teaching people how to install things correctly. So very quickly, PAS 2035 has various roles depending on how you view the project risk. Low risk is probably a one-off building where limited number of interventions are required. High risk, risk path C at the bottom is the sort of project we had, which was 60 units, and we're doing lots and lots of interventions to the houses. So we're doing external wall insulation, ventilation system, we're doing windows and air tightness layer, you name it, we're throwing it at it. And in that scenario, it's deemed that you do need a retrofit assessor, a retrofit coordinator, a retrofit designer, and then, as I say, approved installers. So the retrofit coordinator really should be and is an instrumental role of bringing everyone together and making sure that a project is successful by making sure that the design is correct, making sure that the retrofit assessor has captured all the data at the outset. So it's a really important role, and it's one that I've really enjoyed actually over the last year or so, and it's been been really good. It's helped to make the project successful, and so. Without it, I don't think it would have been a success. So PAS 2035 is a need to design a fabric first whole house retrofit plan. Now you might not have the budget to do all the works in one go, but the idea is that you create a medium term improvement plan for the property, and that you do certain elements of that plan as and when you have funds available. In an ideal world, you'll have lots of funds available, and you would do all of those items on that list, on that improvement plan, all in one go. But clearly that might not be the case, certainly for private individuals doing their own homes. So the idea is that you would pull together a plan of works that you might tackle over, say, a 10 or 20 year time frame. And the idea is that as you do one element, you leave your house in such a condition that when you do the next element, they become complementary, and you don't have to pull the first thing apart to get the second thing installed. So it's trying to think about a long-term scheme of works to give you an energy efficient home at the end. There's a sort of a risk path calculation that's carried out. The idea is there's an interaction between different items, and will it have a cause and effect? So it might be that you're going to put in, let me give you I'm just thinking of a sort of a quick idea. So let's say we're going to put in loft insulation, but we're not going to get right to the eaves, and therefore we're not going to meet up with the EWI, and that could create a risk at the eaves in terms of sort of cold thermal bridging. So there's all sorts of different elements where a risk is introduced because you're doing one measure without necessarily thinking about another measure. And there's a whole table and that you can actually work your way through and check to make sure that your building isn't going to sort of suffer any failures later on. And there is in Annex B of PAS 2035, this sort of risk path analysis table that you can do. One of the other things that PAS 2035 introduces, and it's something as an industry, we're really, really poor at. We don't really like to go back to our clients after we've done any kind of construction work and ask, how did we do? We're not very good at that. And so architects particularly, and I'm not going to pick up, but I am going to pick on you as a profession. Architects, you design fantastic, beautiful buildings, they're constructed, and then how many of you have actually gone back years later and said, how energy efficient is it? How easy is it to maintain? Or how easy was it for that building to be amended in the future? And so I think we're all guilty of it in our industry, of not necessarily wanting to know what the answer is to how good was the building, but we really need to. And PAS 2035 is now starting to introduce this idea of trying to monitor and find out how effective the interventions have been. And the idea is that we're trying to introduce like a quality circle, this idea of finding out information and then improving the design as and when we kind of come back to another building in the future. but also it's helping to try and protect those occupants in those homes by actually monitoring what's going on in their home and making sure that the retrofit has been successful for that individual. So it's a sort of two-pronged kind of attack in terms of monitoring. And that's a sort of a new thing for us really as an industry. It's somewhat in its infancy. We don't do it well enough. So the retrofit assessor goes in and carries out sort of pre-work surveys and makes sure that or identifies what existing defects are there in the building. And ideally, they need to be dealt with before you do any retrofit works, because otherwise there's a good chance you're going to make those defects worse. We're then going to definitely work on coming up with a thorough set of designs. So the drawing on the right-hand side is we were looking at a bay window, and we're trying to make sure that there was a continuity of insulation from the wall insulation to the bay window roof, all the way through down to the walls below. So we're actually putting together detailed section drawings of the works that we intend to apply to a particular building. And it's always fabric first. How can we improve the fabric of the building, make it much more energy efficient? We're going to carry out site visits as the works go through, and also we're going to end up with quite a complicated list of documents that we're going to collate and make sure they're available at the end of the project. So you can see here, there's a condition report at the outset, and we'll be doing a ventilation strategy report before the works start, make sure that the ventilation system that's there is adequate after we've done the works, all the way through to air pressure testing, and also we've got here whether or not we've done all the thermal modelling of all the thermal bridges. So there's quite a lot of documents that get sort of pulled together that we need to make sure are available at the end of the project. So I've kind of whipped through it at a rapid speed because I wasn't quite sure how much time I've got. So these are real photographs of a real project. So as I say, air tightness layer was considered a bit of a, wow, we're going to have an air tightness layer. Because these properties were rendered, we took a gamble on trying to use the external render of the house as our air tightness layer. And then we've tried to make everything else airtight to it. So we've used purple passive paint at the eaves to try and help us join the ceiling inside the loft space, make it airtight all the way through to the render on the outside. And then we've used, you can see there, Proclima's Intello Plus membrane being applied across the ceiling joist to try and give us an airtight box for the whole house. And then behind that, you can see that we were trying to work out, this was a trial house, trying to work out how we were going to install the insulation over the eaves, because that's a real weakness in terms of thermal bridging at that junction. And we ended up using aerogel at that location. So in these couple of images, because we're putting 200 millimeters in old money, that's 8 inches of mineral wool insulation on the outside of the houses. And by moving the windows forward and using GRP brackets, you can we're sticking the windows in the insulation layer where they need to be. And you can also see that we've used a particular sort of very black and horrible gunge as our air tightness gunge to help us give us an airtight seal between the render and the windows. This is all part of a plan. And then the bottom right is the photograph of the corbels, and they were quite a nice brick corbel detail that most of the EWI on this particular estate, so external wall insulation, previously had been installed such that it stopped. And so the brick corbel on the eaves or the gable end of the building stuck through the insulation layer, and they were getting large problems with mold in the corners of the bedrooms on the other side of this. So we've taken the brick corbels away and we've replaced it with the thermalite blocks you can see there. And now the 200 millimeters of mineral wool goes up in front of what was, or where the corbel was, to try and make sure that we get continuity of insulation throughout the whole building. And we've tried to apply these sort of simple techniques to all of the building all the way through. In this particular house, there was no ventilation in terms of no extract fans, so we had a blank canvas to work to. And in this one, we put in a centralized MEV unit in the loft system. It's really quiet. And because we cheekily wired it into the lighting circuit, our lovely tenants can't switch it off. So this means that we can guarantee that we're providing them the right amount of ventilation all the time. So as I say, we're quite cheeky chappies in our own way. So the blue ductwork is on the landing, and that is to pick up the extract point in the kitchen. So carefully detailed and thought through on how we were going to run the ductwork and put the system together. and we spend a lot of time training the operatives on how to do it. And then sort of finish with a photograph of don't do this. So PAS 2035 wants you to make sure that you don't put in these sort of verge trims, etc., because they're not compliant with PAS 2030, nor will you get a SWIGA guarantee. And you should be extending the roof to suit. And certainly that's what we've been doing on the project in Tunbridge, is to extend e-gable ends such that the roof actually oversails the EWI and gives you a long-lasting system. So I've had a real canter through because I wasn't quite sure how long I had. I'm hoping that's kind of giving you a very quick kind of oversight as to PAS 2035 in a quick sprinkling, and a quick sprinkling of a live project that we're currently working on, and some of the good practice that we're trying to employ.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was very clear, I think, and took us through nicely. So that's great. You've got a couple of questions,
yeah, just there's been various people asking, like, you know, where do you find a list of who's registered and certified in this? I suppose there's two questions really, which is like, it feels like there's not enough people trained in PAS 2035, and is that your experience? That it's very yeah.
I think we could go further than that and just say that as an industry, we are severely lacking skilled people, full stop. I've heard even just sort of, shall I say, bog standard trades here in darkest Norfolk. I'm hearing people sort of rocking up on construction sites and offering £300, £400, £500 cash to the bricklayers to get them to leave one site to go to another site. That's kind of not an unusual story currently, and so we have a huge problem that as an industry we're not attractive to the younger generation, and demographically, we are getting very much older all the time as an industry. I think it's something like within the next 10 years, through demographics alone, as well as the industry getting slightly bigger, is that we will probably have something like 700,000 vacancies in the construction industry. So we either going to have to find a lot more people to come and join us. And I would say that ladies in construction, as in getting your hands dirty, ladies in construction, very underrepresented. So is there an opportunity to encourage the better half of the population to come and get involved? But also, do we try and increase productivity such that more people, you have less people being more successful, creating more product? And productivity in our industry has been pretty lousy for a very long time. We've made very little improvement in productivity. So they're perhaps some sort of two easy wins. But clearly, yeah, there is not sufficient numbers of people with experience or have had training on how to do retrofit properly. I did some training at a local college on passive house some years ago, and we were teaching electrician students, bricklayers, carpenters. None of them were taught how to install insulation. There's a thought for you. So no window. See, as I say, I don't think there's a formal training scheme for window installation, and I don't think there's a formal training scheme for installing insulation. And yet we're telling ourselves that we've got to cover all our buildings in lots of insulation. It'd probably be a good point if we knew how to do it properly.
There is an MVQ in for window installation, Alex.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, but I think we will be that in our breakout rooms. That's obviously we're trying to work on that in Yorkshire as well. But I've got one other question, just on your experience of working with PAS 2035. Feels like you've got quite a positive experience, really. You've had, it's been you've been. Oh, it sounds like would you say you've had you're quite in favour of, it's quite a useful process?
I think it's a very useful process. Yes, it is a bit bureaucratic, but it adds discipline to what possibly was an ill-disciplined part of our industry. And I think that discipline and that rigour is a good thing, and certainly forcing and encouraging people to take on a proper design and actually think through what they're going to do to a building, as opposed to just rock up with a load of mineral wool and slap it on the wall and hope for the best and don't worry about the thermal bridges. I'd like to think for under PAS 2035 those days are over. they might not be, but I think it's certainly a good road to take. And I think what Peter Rickaby has done overall has been a fantastic effort, and definitely should be commended for his work over the years to try and make the best of what is a difficult industry to get right. And we haven't had a great history of doing retrofit to a really good standard. So I think Peter Rickaby should be applauded for all the effort he's put in it, because it's been a work of love, isn't it, really, for him to try and help drag us into the 21st century. I admire the man greatly. I can't imagine how he stays so enthusiastic.
Oh, great. We are just to say to everyone, we will be sharing Alex's slides in the next couple of days.
I need to unshare, don't I? How do I unshare? I can't remember now.
Oh, no, it's okay. You're not. I think you're not now.
No, you're unshared, Alex.
You're unshared.
Oh, okay.
I unshared you.
Thank you very much. You see, behind every great man, there's a great woman.
So I think, if you don't mind, Alex, having a look at the questions in the chat, because we probably should move on to the next. That's okay. Sure. But yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Great.
Can we? Yeah, I think it's very interesting though, Alex, and obviously we could have a much longer conversation, and we might do that in the breakout rooms a little bit, about past 2035, because there have also been criticisms about it sort of inhibiting insulating, and I think you make the case that we need to do it properly, but there's a larger subject there. But we need to move on and talk about skills very quickly, which brings us to the AECB CarbonLite retrofit training, and hopefully this will address one of the questions as well about the various training available. So over to Trish. This is something very close to my heart as the longest standing AECB trustee, but I'm going to let you talk about it, Trish.
Okay, thank you. I have unmuted myself, so hopefully you can all hear me okay. And I'll just share my screen. Is that working fine? Right, okay, well, thank you very much for asking me to come and talk again. Obviously I didn't bore you enough last time, but I work at the AECB as the training manager. So I'm not sure how many of you are all members of the AECB. I think quite a few of you have heard of us, but basically we are a network of individuals and companies who really have a common goal of trying to promote sustainable building. We've been going since 1989. Chris might correct me there if that's right or wrong. And I have recently joined them. What we do is we try to bring all those interested parties and people and all the relevant people within the construction industry to help us develop better ways to learn from some of the projects that Alex has just been discussing, promoting skills and also trying to forward best practice. We're run by our members. We're a not-for-profit company, but what we try to do is put together all that collective knowledge into some of the things that we promote as the organisation, right? Talk within webinars, within the membership, and some skills training. Now tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the skills training that we offer, but firstly this is us. We're not quite the motley crew, but we've recently had quite a few additions to us as an organisation in the last year. And one of them, most recently last week, was our new COO, so Operations Director, and he is Duncan Smith. Some of you might know him from Scotland. He casts a very long shadow. He's been working with Renfrewshire County Council up in Scotland for a very long time, really pushing the boat out to work along past standards, but also to really change the tide on doing retrofit at scale within Scotland. So we're really happy to have him involved. So as training manager, I manage what we offer, and currently we offer 3 courses. The first is the long-standing CarbonLite retrofit course, and it's been going since 2016. The second recently started last year, which is a 6-week short course in building energy modelling using PHPP. So that's taking a building design through all the different variations and coming out with and testing them, and then coming out with a certified building at the end, because quite a lot of people do maybe self-training, or they learn PHPP in other training that they do, but they've never taken a building all the way through. So it's to show people how to do that. And last but not least is our new CarbonLite Retrofit Coordination course, which we're hoping to launch imminently, she says very confidently. So what is our CLR course? So this is the first course. We call it CLR for short. So it's our CarbonLite Retrofit course, the longest standing one, recently actually cited in the government's heat and building strategy in October last year, which we were very amazed and interested to see, about a route through for people to learn and skill up towards understanding how to decarbonise buildings, going towards our net zero targets. I'm just going to run through the course a bit more in detail, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions that come either out of the chat or out of longer answers that are needed after the session that we have today. So please don't worry that I'm flying through it. So this course is basically aimed at construction professionals, but also those who want to make decisions in running projects. So it could be, your own house, for instance. You could be a registered social landlord or a local authority. It does require a basic understanding of retrofit projects and being able to understand drawings and some data. Some people who are doing projects on their own do come along and ask us quite a lot of questions when they start doing the CLR, and obviously there's tutors and trainers there to try and help them if it's like their initial dipping their toe into what retrofit's all about. The course is quite holistic. It's all online. It takes about 130 hours. There's 8 modules in total, and most of them are basically a multiple choice scenario based. So you can set a lesson as many times as you like before you pass it. But if you struggle, usually about the second or third attempt, we ask people to contact us and we'll talk them through what's right and what's wrong with the certain aspects that they're not understanding. We give our own accreditation to this course, but as a small organisation, we are punching a little bit above our weight, but it is recognised, and I see that there are some CarbonLite graduates here tonight. I hope you agree that it's quite a thorough course, and it's a good introduction to what deep retrofit and low energy retrofit is all about. We do dovetail that in with standards. I don't know if you're aware that the AECB has written some building standards. They're online for you to have a look. But last year we launched our retrofit standard. So up there with Inefit, not quite as auspicious to be able to get certified, but it is a big stepping stone if people can't get to the Inefit standards, that perhaps they might be able to get to a retrofit standard at scale instead. So please have a look at them. And then the other thing is that we have registered this course with the Passive House Institute, and it's worth 35 Passive House points if you are training towards certification. Like if you're a SEF designer or a tradesperson, you can top up your CPD points with that. So here are some of the modules that we do, and I've listed them so that those who don't know the course sort of get an idea of what it entails. So obviously, first of all, we set out what the CarbonLite retrofit means, what it means to us. And it's not just about us reducing energy in buildings, although that's very important, and our carbon emissions. It goes over quite a lot of ideas about, what shall we call them, the other benefits of doing retrofit well. So where it's about skilling people up, where it's about people being comfortable and healthier in their homes, fuel poverty, reducing pollution within the house, having proper air quality, and then looking at that in the context of the weather of the UK, because not one thing fits all, and definitely siting of buildings are very different in what we should do when we're designing the measures that we should do in a retrofit. So, you know, one building in a street can have, as Alex just mentioned earlier, can be very, very different from the one at the end of the street, or how it's actually been occupied or renovated during its lifetime. The other lessons that we have is we look into all different types of construction. Obviously, the UK, you know, we have very colloquial ways of building. Obviously, I'm from the north, the real north, where you know, having tenement buildings is very, very common in a lot of the cities, and they are very difficult to deal with, let me tell you. But you know, there's other construction techniques and traditional techniques, you know, so that, you know, we're taking the building stock with us and using it today. So we try and look at different types of retrofitted examples of traditional and non-traditional buildings. Most of it is domestic, however. And then we go through looking at how to really look at how a building is put together through its elements, so that you can devise, like as in on the pads, you know, a list of defects that you have to look at first before you say what we're going to do for the new interventions that you're going to make. And then obviously the biggie that Alex did touch on is the performance gap. It's not just about what we design and then estimate what the design will be and what actually happens in reality when we're using the building. It's also about the gaps, the moisture gap, which is a biggie, you know, getting moisture into buildings and how buildings are affected with that as soon as you put insulation in any of the elements, but also the comfort gap, you know, how comfortable people are in the buildings. And then we go through looking at how do you work out delivered energy, primary energy, and how energy works in buildings generally. And then we go through in detail more of the building science. So how does a building perform? How do you apply the physics of understanding? Now you understand what type of construction you've got, what factors of thermal performance and what you can do to them really matter. And we also bring in what we've done historically in stock modelling. So that's looking at a typology of a building and how best to model it to reduce energy demand and what you can do for your retrofit project. And then the largest of all the modules is really moisture. So in that performance gap, moisture is one of the biggest gaps that we miss quite a lot when we're renovating any buildings. And anyone who's ever been in a building that has a problem with moisture and ventilation, it is a very unhealthy place to be. And considering we spend the majority of our time in our homes and in buildings, it's an important factor to look at. So it is quite detailed, and I ask you to look at different types of how moisture gets in, because Alex was talking about detailings, and it's so important that some of the things that go wrong when we try to upgrade buildings without understanding the knowledge, particularly to do with moisture, it's where the elements meet usually that we have the infiltration, or we have moisture working through the build-up of the building, or even getting in through the ventilation system. Whatever, you know, the detailing that we do is extremely important. So if you do the course and you don't take on board lots of it, I would say this is the most important module to take on board, learning how moisture in building works, and what, when you adapt a building, how you change that. We then look at building services, air tightness, electricity, so all you're going to use, and particularly at the end there, we look at renewable energy systems as well. And then last but not least, it's looking at the financial concepts and appraisals, which is just about to be upgraded actually, because we've written a new module for the new course. So that's it in a nutshell. It's £410 plus VAT, 35 credits, and you get a year's access on it, and it's all online. So there's no practical lessons per se, but hopefully quite a lot of the content gives you a good idea of what building is all about. The new course, Retrofit Coordination, is basically being changed from a level 5, which we were hoping to do last year, into actually looking more at the past process itself and trying to push best practice in line with the AECB's retrofit standard. It does cover the role of the retrofit coordinator and roles within the PAS, and it does talk about the PAS process and how it works. It's aimed again at people using retrofit who want to draw down funding for major retrofit projects or are working within them and want to understand the PAS 2035 framework. I'm talking about the framework that Alex was talking about, and not PAS 2030, which I think was mentioned in the flyer, which is to do with installation. So this whole course is 105 hours. It is accredited by ourselves. Again, it's all online, multiple choice, and it's basically putting the first information from the CLR course about good, low energy retrofit design into how it works along next to PAS, really. These are the modules, and obviously, just as Alex explained quite well, it goes through the entire process from inception to completion. One of the major parts of that is really understanding the building and its defects, what the client is needing, and then doing a very thorough risk assessment and dwelling assessment of how we're going to make changes to it, and then going on to the retrofit design. It's really quite interesting that I've come across a few projects where retrofit coordinators or retrofit designers, who may be architects or not, have been asked to join projects after the costing of the project has been done, the money's been drawn down, and the main contractor is running the job. And then all of a sudden you're asked to design things and cut costs. So that we've got a little way to go when we want to make this work properly at scale, because the retrofit design and how we assess the buildings is actually a very, very important part of the process being successful, as well as checking it on site. But it's understanding the importance of each building is slightly different, each project is different, and how do we do that at scale, and how do we do it with a long-term plan so that we're not redoing single measures that have to be redone in 5 years. So the idea of the course is that we're trying to say to people that actually the information that we already know is out there, but how do we put it into a more rigorous process that has now been brought in through the PAS framework, and how do we do that to have a better outcome, if you like. So it also includes, all the building fabric and building physics in it, but it also talks about the improvement plans and how to work with installers, which I think is another important part. It goes over,
Trish,
am I
so
over time?
sorry. It's only that because Holly has to go at 7.
Right, okay, that's no worries.
Have we got many more? Could we come back?
No, I won't go over the third course because it's quite self-explanatory, but I think most people are sort of interested in the retrofit coordination.
Sure. How much does it cost, out of interest, that extra?
It's for CarbonLite graduates or anyone who registers interest before we launch it, it's £250 plus VAT.
Okay.
I think what we'll do is we'll go straight to Holly. Sorry.
And then we'll
that's fine.
Maybe
that's not a problem.
Let you wind up the yeah. Okay, so straight to Holly then.
Questions in the chat, please, and then we'll go straight to Holly and Fiona.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, Trish. I feel like that was...
No, it's fine. I do tend to ramble on, and I was repeating a lot of what Alex said anyway. I was trying to show the modules, but please go ahead. It's fine.
Thank you. So can everyone see that?
Yeah, that's fine, Holly.
Yeah. So I'm coming from a bit of a different angle. I'm not a retrofit expert. I work in education, and that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about sustainability and education, and it's already been picked up on tonight, like the lack of skills, the integration into people who are, learning right now and going into construction. And that's the angle I've come from. And I work at Harrogate College, and what we've been doing is approaching others and working with others to enable us to kind of provide for our community, young people and people who are trying to integrate and change and upskill in their careers. So I started looking at retrofit last year. I did a climate action festival, which I think a lot of you on this call were involved in actually. And I'm going to give you a really brief overview of 2 projects that are going on at the moment, because we've got a small amount of time. Fiona's going to come in from Zero Carbon Harrogate, and then I'll tell you what's happening next and how you can get involved. So I started, as I said, looking into retrofit and the need for it across the district, not only because of obviously everything everybody on this call knows about in change of regulation, the sector and climate targets, but for me, I'm so passionate that we have to be providing relevant education to people, be that adults who want to upskill or people that are training now. So I applied to the Department for Education for a Skills Accelerator fund, specifically in retrofit, specifically in Harrogate in Yorkshire. And I was successful last year, which was fantastic. And I partnered up with another college, I partnered up with some third sector organisations, and 30 businesses wrote a letter of support for that application to the Department of Education. And that money was granted to us as Harrogate College to spend on training, on staff and awareness raising. So some of that money, and they're on the call right now, so hello everybody from People Powered Retrofit. We spoke with them and they have the expertise, and they already had a course, amazingly, on foundations of eco-renovation. So when I go off, I'm sure they're all there on the chat if you want to ask them for information. And what they've done for us, and we're working on this, is that course now is being run at our site in Harrogate, their course with their expertise and teachers. And it actually ran for the first time this Saturday, just gone, on the foundations of eco-renovation. And our teachers from Harrogate College are now on that course. So we're trying to embed those skills into our staff, raise awareness, and allow people to join those courses and upskill. There's another course on the 12th and the 19th of March, and that's still open. And obviously when this PowerPoint is sent round after tonight, you'll be able to click on here and get details of everything that course includes and how to sign up. So that's really exciting that we've been able to, you know, through People Powered Retrofit, provide skills in Harrogate in person for people to train to get things they need, and including our teachers. It's just the start of this kind of revolution in green skills training. As part of this project from the Department for Education, additionally, that means we're going to be able to start delivering domestic energy assessment at a college, which will be accessible to so many more people. And we're looking to try start retrofit assessment later this year, which means we'll be having in-person training through teachers at college, and it'll be able to be kind of funded through different means. So that's one thing, it's like taster of what's going on right now at college. The second thing I'm going to bring Fiona in for, because we were really successful through another bid through them to start even more retrofit courses at Harrogate College. Fiona, do you want to give a quick overview?
Yeah, I think actually a lot of people may have heard us speak back before summer holiday about this project. So I'll just do a very quick recap. It is the fact that Zero Carbon Harrogate spotted the issue with both supply and demand with retrofit in the Harrogate district. So we not only wanted to increase the amount of supply that there was for retrofit services, because when people said, do you know someone who does retrofit? I said, well, actually, we don't know that many people. So we needed to have a lot of builders and plumbers and tradespeople trained up in the skills needed to provide retrofit services, as well at the same time increasing the demand from homeowners, especially able to pay homeowners as well. That's our target audience for our funding project at the moment, and for our funded projects at the moment. And so we've been very lucky to be successful in 2 bids. So unfortunately, I can't give the exact details yet because we're actually just ironing out a few things this week. But this is just sort of a sneak preview before we send out our press release in a week and a half's time. And the general gist is that we will now have funds to train up tradespeople in retrofitting skills. In partnership, obviously, at Harrogate College doing it locally with the courses provided by People Powered Retrofit, and we will be training retrofit assessors, coordinators, builders, plumbers to install air source heat pumps, and the numbers are there. So we've got funding for that amount of people to train up. It's a 2-year course to start with, but that's just the beginning. Once we start a snowball effect of kickstarting the retrofit industry in the Harrogate district, this should start to carry on by itself. And we're aiming it at people who are already in the trades, and it's an upskilling course so that they can get straight on with projects. And again, we are advising people to do whole house retrofit. So we're advising that assessor and coordinator role at the beginning. We've also managed within our funding to get funds for quality checks at the end as well, even if people decide to go off their own route and if private homeowners decide not to use a coordinator for some reason, we can still quality check it at the end for them, because the whole point of this project is to make sure that people have they trust the process, because then it'll work long term. And so obviously it's just really exciting to be working with Holly on this, and it's sort of it's great that it's all come to fruition now. The one exciting thing I wanted to share with you, in advance of the job advert going live, is that we also have now got the funds to hire a project manager for this project on a 4-day week. It's a 20 grand a year job for 2 years. And so we're looking for people who are engagement specialists, project managers, people in events, that sort of thing. Someone with the people skills to engage with all the stakeholders that are needed on this, not just homeowners and the building trade, but also, the council, local climate action groups, and estate agents, letting agencies, that sort of thing. So they don't need to have any particular skills in retrofit as such, although training will be given, and so that they know about the project as well. But hopefully, there may even be someone on this call right now who thinks, oh, that sounds like a job for me, or I know someone who that sounds perfect for. So I've put my email address in the chat. Please do get in contact if you think this would be of interest, because this person is going to be key in making sure this project is successful, to make sure that they're recruiting people to get trained, and connecting them with the homeowners and helping them, helping the homeowner through the project, through the retrofit project as well. So it's just really exciting stuff. And Holly, thank you for supporting us in this all the way through. All the way from the beginning, almost a year ago now, wasn't it, where we had this idea? Yeah. So thank you.
So it's really exciting that these 2 different types of funding have come through and allowed us to just take this forward. And what next that involves people on this call is I'm hosting a retrofit awareness event, because all of these things, if people are engaged, homeowners, landlords, letting agents, and those, and people in the trades, what if they're not engaged in why they should come to do these upskill courses, it takes us back a step. So again, the sign up link is here when these are sent out. I'm holding that event on the 17th of February, 5 till 7. It's free, and so you should either come down, share it with your networks. It'll be really great to see some of you there. And I know that you're all going to be discussing in the breakout rooms how, and I just thought I'd give my ideas on that. As you can see, the theme for those 2 big projects was that funding had to be applied for externally, and there was collaboration with so many different people to make that happen. And even though that's really positive and exciting, I think that I would call for standardised qualifications in this from the government, especially for young people. There isn't a government qualification that includes all the things past 2035, air source heat pumps, all the new technologies that we need. There isn't any government funding for that, and so it's hard. you know, we're calling on other people for their expertise to help us train staff in colleges. And we've had so much help already, and that's great. And improved awareness for people working in the industry for why they should upskill. And this is a picture of the event that we held last year, where people could come find out more about it. Awareness for homeowners and for those people who are like social housing contractors and people like that. And in general, my idea for how we can get more people into all industries is that we need feedback. Feedback is so vital. I think people think around education, and especially in FE, they think, well, if the course isn't on your website, you don't do it. Well, that's not true anymore, actually. Like, if an employer wants a course, we can do it. And we just need help from employers and people who work in the industry to give their feedback and to let us know these are the skills people need. This is what they want. And that means we can alter our curriculum. It means we can put on courses for adults who need to upskill, and just kind of have that dialogue. So again, there's an invite here for the network that I also run for all industries, but relevant to this group, there's an energy and construction subgroup that I also run that gathers feedback on how we can change curriculums. And that was extremely fast, but
thank you so much, Holly.
thank you very much.
I know you have to rush, so I'm giving you permission to leave quickly, and nobody will think you're being rude. I know.
Yeah, please feel free to contact me, and I'll send the PowerPoint out so everyone can get the links, and I'll put my email in the chat box now before I leave. Thank you very much, everyone.
Really inspiring, thank you. Okay, if we have, do you want to add anything, Fiona? Or are you...
No, I'm going to stick around in breakout rooms, chat to people. I've got want to pick lots of people's brains as well. So,
thank you. Were there any questions around? I think there weren't. Going back to the CLR course as well. I didn't.
Sure. There were a few about, like, if you were going back to the CarbonLite course, there was something about as an individual, if you're like an individual, not necessarily a professional, is it something you could contemplate trying?
Yeah, I think the original CLR, yes, it may take you a bit longer to understand some of the building physics module, but I think it's written in a way that it's not, you know, for experts or building physicists. So, and there is help on board if you have any queries with any of your understanding. So I'd say yes, it is designed to be able to help individuals as well as people who do it, you know, in the day jobs.
Great, thank you. I've got a question for Fiona and the Harrogate group. Well, actually two. One was about, so past 2035, when you talk about retrofit assessment, is there a connection between those two?
So you mean when we're going to be training up
the new course that you're doing? Yeah.
So the funding that we've got is to train people in retrofit assessment, the accredited courses, and the retrofit coordinators as well, so that they meet those standards. Yeah. So
that will, completely for past 2035. Brilliant.
Yes.
That's really great news. What's the other? Oh yeah, for other colleges, would other colleges be able to replicate what you've done at Harrogate, do you think? Is that sort of...
Well, I know, obviously I can't speak completely on behalf of Holly, but I know that her funding bid involved Craven College, so already there's replication there, that the two are going to be sharing resources and skills there. I mean, the whole point of why we wanted to do this project in general was because we wanted to show that actually if we do you know, increase supply and demand in an area, we can kickstart this sort of retrofit microclimate that can be replicated anywhere. I mean, it would be lovely if the government could have done it already, but we thought, well, why not? We'll go ahead and do it, and they can see how great it is and copy us. But yeah, obviously, you know, as we've got everything in place, you know, it's a two-year project. So very quickly, people will be able to see how it's working. And of course, we're also, you know, want to be quite sort of quick on our feet as the project is going. If we see that things need to change, we need to make modifications, you know, we'll do that to make sure that it's successful. And especially it's the trust from homeowners in the services they're getting are to the right standard. Otherwise, you know, it'll fall flat on its face if the standard isn't right. So that's really important to us with this project, the standard of work.
Brilliant. I'll just keep going through the questions. If you see any that I have missed, just have a look at those.
Maybe we ought to move on if we're going to do
Yeah. One thing, because we rushed Trish as well, is there anything you wanted to say to wrap up in your bit on especially on the past 2035 course?
Well, I think it's just to say that I think there's a lot still to be learned. There's lots of people who still don't have the skills to do the projects and getting them all together in the one place for the one project. We're still pretty, you know, far behind in having that amount of people in the industry. So training is key. And obviously we're happy to discuss with any others about, you know, I mean, I'm just thinking of UNIT, etc., advertising, you know, what you're doing. It's really important for us as a membership organisation to share that and get it out there to any audiences we can. But just to be mindful that, you know, we should all be supporting each other. And if you've got a question, just send it to training@aecb.net and we'll happily point you in the direction of someone who we know is doing those training skills as well as ourselves. If our course is particular for you, then that's fine. If it's not, we would like to pass you on to other people. So I'm just saying that we're not just here saying the AECB is doing this and that's all there is to offer. What we're trying to do is get the whole industry to change. So we're happy to share people's events and also support, you know, zero carbon Harrogate as well. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that's great. It's very kind. Thank you.